And we are back with my favorite source for movie news that I like to argue with. WeGotThisCovered.com. Now, I come to this site pretty much for takes that are, in my opinion, quite ridiculous and that I can disagree with. However, occasionally they do actually have some takes, or at least they cover some things in a way that aren't too bad. And today they are talking about how Chris Pine admits what everyone already knew by declaring his Star Trek franchise, quote, cursed. So we are, of course, talking about the Abrams films and the new Star Trek movies, the Kelvin verse, however you want to refer to it. I love this series for many reasons. I've discussed it before. But that's not what this video is about. It's more about just like what's going on with Star Trek 4. Is it happening? What's wrong? And their take here basically is, at this stage, it would be more of a surprise if the long gestating Star Trek 4 actually happened, given the massive volume of high-profile setbacks to have dogged the sci-fi sequel over the years. And then, of course, they comment on the fact that Chris Hemsworth, most people know him as Thor, but he played George Kirk, who is James T. Kirk's father, in the first new film at the beginning of it. And he was signed back on to play him again. And then so was Chris Pine, signed back on to play James T. Kirk, and they both ended up dropping out. And then later, Chris Pine did sign back on to play the captain of the Enterprise. And then you had different directors and writers brought on, and they all dropped out or moved on to other things. And basically we've had all these like comments over the last couple of years from different actors, saying, yeah, we would love to do this. We really enjoyed doing Star Trek. It was a fun time, and they were really good productions, very well done, well put together. And I think the cast just enjoyed doing that for their job. And Chris Pine has recently talked about it too, wanting to come back and make the fourth film. But he basically comments, this is Chris Pine talking about it. I'm not sure Star Trek was ever built to do that kind of business. I always thought, why aren't we just appealing to this really rabid fan group and making the movie for a good price and going on our merry way, instead of trying to compete with the Marvels of the world? And he's right. So he says, after the last one came out and didn't do the 1 billion that everybody wanted it to do, and then Anton passed away, and of course he's talking about Anton Yelchin, who played Chekhov in the new Star Trek films. There was an accident where he died at a young age. Says, I don't know, it just seems cursed. I don't know anything. In Star Trek land, the actors are usually the last people to find out anything. I know costume designers that have read scripts before the actors. I would say it's frustrating. It doesn't really foster the greatest sense of partnership, but it's how it's always been. I love the character, I love the people, I love the franchise. But to try to change the system in which things are created, I just can't do it. I don't have the energy. And he's right. So the comment there he made at the top where he says, that kind of business. Why aren't we just appealing to this rabid fan group and, trying to make $1 billion and compete with Marvels? It's kind of insane. Obviously Paramount has a long-running, beloved franchise, and they see it as an opportunity to build a big-time $1 billion box office, which, commendable. I would love to see Star Trek doing that kind of thing. But it probably just isn't. Now, can it be a box office success? Can it be a summer tentpole? For sure. The first one, Star Trek in 2009, came out with something like 75 million on its opening weekend and went on to make hundreds of millions of dollars and turned a profit, brought Star Trek back to kind of the mainstream recognition. People knew what it was. It was on cereal boxes. There were action figures. They did it right. They really did. They kind of recaptured, public interest in the brand. And then Star Trek Into Darkness came out, had a slightly bigger launch, actually, and made a little bit more money. And it's my favorite of the series. But it did well. It was, a blockbuster hit. But what were these films? Billion-dollar box office movie? Like, no. You're talking Star Wars territory there. You're talking, Spider-Man or whatever. You're just not going to get that with Star Trek. Can you reach 500 million? 400 million? Something in that range? Yeah. But the problem is they always want to balloon the cost of these films, right? And the marketing. Instead of saying, like, let's make a really great $100 million movie. Because you used to be able to do this. Let's make a really great $100 million movie. Let's put the marketing into it. And then it'll go out there. It'll make a profit. The fans will be happy. And we'll have something that we can keep building on over time that will just keep making us money. It's not going to pay all of our bills for the year, but it's going to add to everything, That should have been the way they approached it. Rode the success of the relaunch of the series on the big screen and kind of kept doing it that way. The problem with Star Trek Beyond was, first of all, the marketing seemed a lot lighter than the first two films. The movie was definitely, I don't want to say it was bad in any kind of way. It was actually a really good movie, but it didn't have the same kind of spectacle level, the same kind of like, this is a big time summer blockbuster. It just didn't have that feel to it. It was a great movie. It was a really good Star Trek film, but it's probably actually my least favorite of the series. But that, along with just kind of mismanaging marketing on the release, they could have timed it to match the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, because that was part of what was going on. They could have made that a big deal, but they didn't. There were a lot of mistakes made, I think, in the run-up to the launch of Star Trek Beyond that led to it being the least successful of the three films. Now, that was bound to happen. There's always going to be a least successful. But think of the term you're using there. Least successful. So it was, in fact, a successful movie. It did turn a profit. It wasn't panned by critics or fans. It was a good movie, and it made some money. That should be good enough to turn around and do it again, and quickly. Not the next year, obviously, even if you wanted to let a few years go between it. But again, we're looking at, well, if there is a fourth film that begins production, it may not begin production until 10 years after the last one. That's kind of crazy. It's 2023. So the approach here, like he said, should be, let's just make a really good movie basically at a decent price and make the fans happy. And that's really all you should do. You have to have different levels of success in your portfolio. Every single franchise cannot be your billion-dollar box office movie. And when you try to do that, you stretch a concept beyond its means. So I think it's a really good take by Chris Pine. I appreciate the fact that he seems to care about the franchise. He does care about the role. The guy has moved on and done, other things. I mentioned this before in one of my other videos talking about Star Trek 4 and its production woes and all that. This cast, they were all good people, I feel like. Besides just being good representations of the characters and acting them well, like executing the characters, they did all seem to actually enjoy it and for the most part want to come back to it. And that's considering they've had successful careers afterwards, especially Chris Pine. I'm pretty sure he's been the most successful other than Zoe Saldana in Guardians of the Galaxy and such. So for them to say, hey, I love the character, I love the people, the franchise, and have this take of like, this could have been a healthy way to carry it on, I appreciate that. And I will keep standing for this cast and crew and this version, this take on the universe. It's just really unfortunate that it seems at this point to be kind of lost, and maybe it is cursed just by the expectations of Paramount and the executives up above. Instead of giving it its proper place and handling it in a way that keeps it going, they wanted just way too much from it. that just doesn't match what Star Trek is.